Good evening to you both. And let's begin with awaiting a royal arrival. The King and Queen arriving this week at our nation's High Commission in London to help celebrate the centennial of Canada House. And it comes ahead of a visit to Ottawa next week when King Charles will deliver the throne speech opening the next session of Parliament. Kathy, it will certainly be unique to see the King deliver the speech from the throne on Tuesday. What's to be made of that, though, for the start of this new minority Parliament?
I think there's two aspects to it. First of all, I think it's a big feather in Mark Carney's hat. It suggests that he has the kind of pull that can, attract the king to come and do the throne speech. And obviously, it's a message about Canada's sovereignty, I think, and where old allegiances lie. So I think it's really it's an interesting message that's being sent here about those ties. And it's the first time since 1977 we've had a sitting monarch do the throne speech.
Brendan, how do you see this unique speech from the throne playing into Mark Carney's arrival in Parliament as Prime Minister and first-time MP?
Yeah, well, I think I would agree with Catherine that it highlights the fact that he was the head of the bank in the UK, and so he has that pull of those connections, and he's using them, and potentially it signifies, Canada's willingness, as Carney has indicated, to explore, other relationships outside the U.S. In terms of trade or security, and kind of focus on those. And he's said many times that, the old relationship with the United States is changing, and it's not going to be the same. And so this, it's symbolic as all sort of activities that the monarch engages in mostly are, for the most part. But it does send that sort of that message or plays into what he's been talking about.
Now, Kathy, what are you looking for in terms of political dynamics in the House of Commons coming up? How civilized a session do you see this being?
I think it will be very interesting. First of all, we have Andrew Scheer is going to be speaking for the opposition in the House as the acting Conservative leader in the House because Pierre Poilievre doesn't have a seat yet. I think he is not, how shall I put this? He's not one to pull punches. So I think there won't be a really totally easy ride for the Liberals. But at the same time, certainly the Conservatives and the Bloc are not in a position and do not want to do something wacky like trigger yet another election. And they've pretty well signaled that they won't. So I think it will be civil to the point that we're not going to get any threats about pulling the pin on this parliamentary session.
Brendan, how much do you see the Carney-led Liberal minority playing with the other parties?
Well, they're going to have to on some things. I know there's already been reports of, potentially some Conservatives being willing to support certain legislation, like, for example, the tax cut, which, they were both, the Conservatives and the Carney Liberals were proposing a tax cut to the income tax. But of course, they had different levels, right? But whether they could work with some Conservatives on that to get it passed. The NDP, I think, they're focusing on getting official party status, and so whether they can say, we will support certain objectives or certain pieces of legislation in return for, official party status. That could be part of it too. I think the interesting thing will be to see whether anybody actually crosses the floor and moves to support the Liberals, because of course they are fairly close to a majority. And if they could get a few people to switch parties, then they would be in a majority position, although with a thin majority. So I think that's something to watch for too. Whether that happens or not, I don't know.
Kathy, you mentioned Andrew Scheer's new role. Expectations for how the Conservatives will approach parliamentary engagement without Pierre Poilievre in the House?
I think at this point, Andrew Scheer will probably not be trying to make a whole lot of political points simply because he doesn't have skin in the leadership game. But that said, he has a naturally combative personality. And so I think we might see a few fireworks there. I think the Conservatives have been somewhat chastened, although they did quite well, really, in the election. So I think they'll be finding their way, and they really have to be careful to not overplay a hand when people in Canada are looking for some unity in the face of the major economic challenges we have on the international front.
Brendan, with Pierre Poilievre yet to go through the by-election process in the Battle River Crowfoot riding here in Alberta, how much of an opportunity is this for the Conservatives to rebuild?
Well, I mean, I think we've heard rumblings, during the campaign and after about sort of this push and pull between whether it's, the Ontario Conservatives and the federal Conservatives, or whether you want to frame it as sort of the PCs versus, the Conservatives. I think there's a lot of questions that the party has about how to move forward, but I think you do need, leadership to do that. And so I don't know. In a lot of ways, I think a lot of those questions will be put on hold until, over the summer, until the fall, when Poilievre's back in. We see what his plans are moving forward with the party. And then we'll see whether it's in the spring or whether, there's been some rumblings about it being earlier than that. There's the next convention. We'll see kind of what the future of the party looks like going forward.
Kathy, what do you see a potential Conservative rebuild looking like at this point? And if there is one, does it come in the near term or does it evolve over time?
I think that entirely depends on whether they decide to unite behind Poilievre or not. Certainly there are rumors there's some dissatisfaction there. Is it enough to actually try and shunt him to the sidelines? That's the question. And so I think first they have to deal with that leadership question. They will have to make a show of that decision on whether or not they are going to solidly be behind him. And once that is done, then they need to reframe, decide if they want to move a little bit further into the center, although the center is certainly pretty crowded because that's where the Liberals went. So it's a very interesting situation to watch them try to figure out how they can get up that 5 to 10% of the popular vote that they need in order to actually get back into government.
And Brendan, there will be no budget, at least in the near term, maybe one planned for the fall. How much tolerance are Canadians going to have through the honeymoon period for this new government, especially around expectations to act quickly, get stuff done?
Yeah, I mean, so there are certain promises that were made on the campaign trail, right? We have interprovincial trade barriers coming down by July 1st, or, maybe it's just introducing legislation by July 1st. Obviously, they're going to have to move on the tax cut, I think, right away. So there are expectations on certain files. But I would think, I think maybe the leash would be a bit shorter overall just because this is still a Liberal government, although the leader has changed and a lot of the ministers have changed. I do wonder if there's a bit of a shorter leash in terms of what Canadians are willing to give them, because they've said, well, we're giving you a fourth mandate here as a party. And so, I think they have to be pretty careful. I think a lot of it's going to come down to how they deal with the threats south of the border and how they manage Donald Trump tariffs. If they're showing progress on that file and handling it well, I think then they're going to it could be extended in terms of their honeymoon period.
We heard from the Association of Alberta Childcare Entrepreneurs off the top of the program tonight on the Smith government's decision to place a cap on grants for new for-profit daycares. Brendan, what's to be made of this development landing one day ahead of a cabinet shuffle, and that the minister who sent out the notification is now in a whole different portfolio?
Right, yeah, you saw that the new minister say, I've been on this file for about 3 or 4 days, so I'm going to have to listen and then get back to you. I mean, I think that's adding to the uncertainty that comes along with federal-provincial negotiations. And so, whether they thought the province believed that they could get the federal government to add more flexibility to this agreement and allow, more spaces for profit daycares as opposed to focusing primarily on nonprofit. I don't know if there's a miscalculation there or what it was, but I think, it certainly seems to us come as a surprise to some of the providers that had been working with the province and getting these things set up, that, they wouldn't necessarily be eligible for the funding that many of their colleagues or peers or other businesses in this industry are already have access to.
Kathy, something like 3 ministers have already handled this file so far. Dimitrios Nicolaides now adds it to his education portfolio. What kind of pressure does this latest development put on his plate to contend with?
Well, I mean, this is a very vocal group. There's no question, the private childcare providers, and they will not let up on trying to get this settled. But this is deja vu all over again. This is essentially what happened when the initial deal was made, because Alberta was, I think, the last or the second last to actually sign on. And once again, it is in the last three to sign for an extension. Other provinces have done this. I'm not sure if Ontario has done it yet, but Saskatchewan and Alberta have not. So once again, the province really is holding out to get exactly what it wants, just as it did before. And the private providers are the ones, specifically the private providers who want to either expand or establish new childcare centers, are the ones who get caught in the middle of that.
Yeah, certainly an interesting dynamic developing there. For us, one more topic. That's on the growing talk of support for separatism. The latest polling by Leger suggests 29% of Albertans want the province to become a country independent of Canada, while 67% oppose the idea, and 5% say they don't know. Of the 1,000 surveyed, 43% say economic reasons such as taxation and federal policies are reasons they support independence. Kathy, this of course comes as efforts ramp up for a citizen-led referendum on separation, one made easier by new changes in provincial legislation. What do these poll results suggest to you about ebb and flow of support and how motivated some Albertans actually are?
I thought the detailed results of this poll were really very interesting. For one thing, it shows quite a split in the population. These numbers don't work across all demographics. We find, for instance, that outside of the cities, there's greater support for an independent Alberta. We find that among young males, there's support for an independent Alberta. Which is not that surprising, I don't think. I think this is a group that feels particularly economically disenfranchised. And so basically they're saying we're willing to try anything in order to give ourselves a better chance in the future. And the other thing that I thought was interesting was when you asked the question about what if it were a complete Wexit, where Manitoba to BC all split off from Canada, the support goes up, because of course that almost seems like an actual economic unit as opposed to one province.
Brendan, whether it's coming from Leger or any of the other notable organizations surveying support, how much weight does polling on separation carry at this point? What do you see it serving to do?
Yeah, well, it usually tends to be around 25% to 30%, so a quarter to almost a third of people that have this support. And of course, I think that it depends a lot on how you ask the question, and so you can frame it in ways that muddy the waters a little bit, and then you could get more support. But I think, in my mind, anyways, I think it is sometimes shocking to people that 25-30%, it's not close to a majority, but it's a large amount of people. You probably know somebody 20 to 30% of the population. And so I think we do have to be really careful about what these statistics are actually showing, what questions are being asked, because that will determine the level of support. And also, I think maybe having the substantive discussion rather than just the horse race discussion. We do talk a lot about, what are the numbers here, what are the numbers there. But, there are a lot of economists that are coming out and saying, like, look, the perceived advantage that we would have from separation is just not there, that the costs would outweigh the benefits, whether it's, not being part of a country that has access to tidewater, all these different things, right? I think in some ways, that's where the discussion needs to move and have a substantive conversation rather than focusing on the numbers and where that support is, about what this actually would mean. Because that, of course, should be what determines people's decision and what determines those numbers in the end.
Kathy, one last quick one for you, and we bring it back to that element of Parliament being about to sit. How much pressure do you expect there to be on the new Prime Minister to unite Canada as a nation and respond to an upsurge in Alberta separation sentiments?
I think he will certainly be trying to do some work on that file, if only because when you are doing the negotiations with Trump, you don't need that amount of noise going on in the background. They really have to worry a bit about some elements in the Republican Party saying, "But look, there's all of this support for the 51st state idea in Alberta, and so why are we even talking to these people about reducing tariffs? Why don't we just put the question to them?" I think it's that noise he doesn't need. I think he really needs a united country in order to be able to take Canada's position out there into the global market.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for time. Good to see you both. Thank you for this.
Thanks.